Out of the gates, ready to go. OutKick 360 is back. Monday edition is here. Plenty to hit over the next 3 hours across the OutKick network and live from 6th and Peabody with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. The crew all here. We have former Texans head coach David Culley, who was in Houston for last season. He's in studio with us coming up in 20 minutes. A lot to discuss with him. He's in town for a golf tournament and is nice enough to swing by live with us here at 6th and Peabody. Beyond that, Deshaun Watson and his hearing with the NFL for disciplinary reasons begins tomorrow in front of Sue Robinson. And the Texans have been named formally in the civil lawsuit by Tony Busby, who did that on behalf of some plaintiffs down in Texas earlier today. The Avs hoist the cup. Yankees and Braves on full display all weekend. Gentlemen, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. It was an eventful sports weekend for the middle to late June with everything going on. So I had a lot of fun watching baseball over the weekend. Had fun watching the Stanley Cup final last night, and coming off what was not the greatest NBA draft broadcast that I've ever witnessed. It was a nice weekend.
I did not have a lot of fun watching sports this weekend because Saturday marked the end of Simon's career as a under 12 and under baseball player. So now that's the last of the small fields for him. 13 is where you jump to the big field. He played on the big field as a JV player at school, but just two miserable losses. One, a close game, 5-0 lead, lose 7-6 in extras. Then the second, just a game that got out of control. And I, fellas, maybe Chad used to put me on the couch. I am having a lot of trouble coming to terms with this. We had the season-ending party at my house yesterday. A lot of fun. Kids went over to a nearby field, played a huge wiffle ball game. I've got this game I need you guys to play sometimes called Cub. It comes from Sweden. It's a great hand-eye coordination game. Your dad would be dominant at it. It's loads of fun. Guys got into it. One guy ordered it between games to get it set at home. We had a great time, drinking, eating, all of that. But I still wake up this morning, first thought in my head is about this damn game.
Is it the game that you got blown out in, or the close loss?
The close
you're
loss
thinking about more than the other one?
But both just eating at me, and I gotta.
You
let
sound
it go.
like me prepping for a possible loss in the championship game of the softball league, where I was saying that was the one. Well, actually, it was the semifinal where I said if we lose in this round for a second straight year after dominating the regular season, it's going to haunt me for a while, way longer than it should haunt me. So I understand the feeling.
We had our best
Did you know
pitcher
going in, Paul, that you were going to be this remorseful / sad about the end of 12 under baseball?
You expected to win.
Well, yeah, I expected to be playing on Sunday at least. But I am very sentimental about the end of things, And the team will be different and all of that. It's a great group of kids. But also, it was we finished 7th in pool play, right? Went 2-0. But when we go 2-0, usually we give up the most runs. And so we end up the last of the 2-0 teams. So we were 7th. So we're the last seed in the top bracket. Now, if we had finished 8th, we'd probably win the middle bracket. So is it bad that I would have rather finished 8th and won the middle bracket than been in the top bracket?
You'd rather be NIT champion
where we wouldn't
than
have
first round exit?
Well, we weren't going to win the top bracket. There were some real big-time teams in the top bracket.
That's why I would not be able to wait to get to the bigger field.
But the team that won the whole thing, the top bracket, is the team we lost 7-6 to in extras in the first game that we should have beat. We were up 5-0. And we threw our big guy, our power hitter, who when he's throwing great, when he's throwing strikes, is dominant. And he was throwing strikes, and we pulled him after 3 innings because we're up 5-0. Coach felt a little too comfortable and felt like I can use this guy again later. I love the coach, but he didn't have a great day. And going to a softer thrower, then they were like, oh, thank God the fastballer's out.
Now, is this the end of the coach and like the actual team, or like you just move everything up to the big field?
Well, he'll have tryouts, so you've got to make it again.
Does he go up to 13 under?
Yeah.
So he follows the same. That's good.
So his son is on this team.
No, his son, he has no son.
This is his job.
But so that's crazy. So he doesn't just stay in the 12U program?
No, we don't have a program. We're one team, which is, I think,
he's
a beauty
paid to coach the team.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you really wanted to form just domination, you could have him stay and form a new, 12-year or under team, right? And you could still be the Admirals or whatever.
Yeah, but he'd be starting from zero. We kind of started from zero.
Is this coaching error enough to keep him down at 12 under?
No.
I mean, you have a feeder system.
Coach.
I'm kidding.
He's a terrific coach.
And move up to 13 under. How is Simon taking the loss?
He was really pissed, but he gets over it better than I do. Like, he's over. They played wiffle ball. Now that's
had a great party
the biggest thing on his mind in the party.
I would say if this was the last tournament no matter what, right? There wasn't a win in advance to the next week or anything.
No. At some point, you got to stop playing and have the rest of your
I
summer.
would say that if Simon's over it, you should now be over it too.
Yeah.
I would understand if it's like we win these 2 games or hold a 5-0 lead and we're going to Cooperstown for the national tournament or to a state tournament somewhere else. I could understand harboring some resentment or some issues with that game. But if Simon's over it, you should be over it.
Part of the problem, too, that makes it hard for me is he's grown into a really good defensive shortstop. He's not a great hitter by any means. He's got a long way to go. But he's grown into a very good defensive shortstop. We don't have another guy that can play a good shortstop. And so his pitching is limited because when he comes into pitch, we have a really big defensive downgrade at shortstop. So he pitched the last 2 innings of the game I'm talking about, and one of the reasons we lost in extras is because the replacement shortstop made a big error.
But
so
he had to go
coach is reluctant to pitch him because the defense goes down, and he really wants to pitch. And I really want to see him pitch.
All these kids now are playing like for local middle school teams on your team, on your travel ball team?
Well, not all 6th graders get to play middle school ball. The ones that did. Simon did. Couple other guys.
See, it's so different from when I played travel ball, tournament team ball, because we all played in a league, in Mount Druitt Little League, so we were all drafted to different teams, the Cardinals, the Blue Jays, the A's, the Rangers, the Braves. But everyone on the tournament team was probably a 1st or 2nd round pick. So when you say there was a hole at shortstop, that was impossible with our team because everyone played shortstop for their league team.
It's a team full of shortstops.
Because they would take the best, athletes, and you would play either shortstop or pitcher or first base. The problem was getting kids that had never played the outfield,
right fielder,
to learn how to play the outfield. Or you would pick one catcher that was the best catcher in the league because that kid played catcher the whole time. But every single player on our team could pitch if needed because we all pitched for our league team. Every player could play short. Every player could probably play 2nd or 3rd. In the infield, it was getting the other position. So that surprises me that you don't have other secondary options that can step in and play shortstop.
We will next year.
That's good.
So,
Chad, how did Sunday school go for you? You taught Sunday school.
What was the lesson?
It was good. I was placed in charge. It was funny. You mentioned eye for eye. It was about Jesus healing the blind, right? With the mud and the spit and the clay, and then the pools that were washed in it. So my table, I was placed in charge of the boys' table. It's very evenly split. The girls sit at one table.
They became men.
Are the boys unruly?
The boys are with us.
How old?
There are 2 boys that are brothers, that are twins, that I think are so accustomed with rough play in their house and pushing each other down and fighting that you have to separate them pretty quickly. And I've handled this Sunday school before where you got to put one on one table, the other, because it gets unruly if not. I mean, these are, I think, 2nd grades. It's probably kindergarten through 2nd grade is the age range. But we had no big incidents. There was one kid I kind of respected because he paid no attention to the lesson, but they have this summer challenge pack that's got like word searches and all the stuff they do for Sunday school. And he just did his word search the whole time. And it reminded me of myself in elementary school or junior high doing my homework during school, so I didn't have any homework at night. So, everybody else is playing these little baby games, and he's just sitting there pounding out the word search, making sure that's done. I respected that. But, yeah, I mean, it was, there was, again, no big incidents. We did a game where you had to blindfold your partner, and you had to lead them around the room, and you deducted a point if they hit anything. Is how we started. So
I think it would have been better. I think it would have been better if you put a twist on this game, blindfolded both the leader and the led, and called it the blind leading the blind.
Well,
that would have been a fun game.
So my issue, and I'm going to have a problem with this, I'm sure at some point, coaching also. I will grab a kid and physically move them somewhere. And I have to almost stop myself because I'm so accustomed to it with like nieces and every little kid I've ever been around. It's always been fine in my family to like, hey, not in an angry way, but like, no, you need to go over here, like pick them up and move them. And I caught myself doing that with the twins 2 different times where they kept throwing something. Like one kid took his belt off, tied it around his brother on his foot and was trying to like drag him to trip him. And I had to like grab the leg.
To trip the blind?
I had to grab his leg, yank the belt, and then hand it back to the kid. And then I'm like, hey, you need to go over here now. You need to go over here. And he's trying to do something. And he's not going to move until I said, nope, right here. So I'll grab him by the arm and physically move him to the other table. And I'm thinking to myself, I probably need to watch this because someone's going to have some problem and I'm going to have no defense other than, I moved your kid from one spot to the other. Sue me. To which they probably will sue me.
There were no incidents, but one kid took off his belt, tied it around another kid's foot, and yanked him to the ground. But there was incident-free.
Some light Chinese water torture, at one point. There was some waterboarding going on.
If this were anything but Sunday school, it'd be compared to Squid Game. But it's
right,
not.
This
nowhere
was
close because it happened at the church.
They could have run over to the baptismal font and been cleansed of their sins if need be.
These kids have to learn early on. It is fascinating to watch the attention span of a small kid. Like my daughter's pretty good at staying with it for about 5 minutes, but most of
what
them.
Age group is this?
Like you start talking,
he
and
said
it's
kindergarten and second.
The other thing I noticed is when you read from the Bible, with like a kid at my table wanted to read, Julian, this little boy, and like
good
my
reader?
daughter read and then he read, but it's a really hard time getting to the end of the line and then finding their spot on the other side. So I was having to. Like on the page, go down and like point to the next word every time because he was jumping 1 or 2 lines in the Bible every time he would read.
Simon's doing a little Bible reading these days, and I asked him like how he chooses. He said, "I just open it to a random page."
That's like the game on the globe. There was a globe in this Bible school classroom yesterday where you spin it. Remember, then you just put your hand on it, and that's where you're going to live when you grow up. Did you guys ever play that game? Like I had a globe in my room. Like, all right, wherever it lands on,
you won
that's where you got to move when you're older.
So where were you living?
We do that. That's just open up the Bible and start reading.
That's when you developed your love of Qatar.
I've always loved
Qatar.
A globe.
Yeah, globes are
like
cool.
Even yesterday in the classroom, I find myself not watching my group and just studying the globe as I'm looking at it in the classroom. I love it.
I like globes.
So. Anyway,
coming up,
exciting.
David Culley is here with us at 6th and Peabody. Former Texans head coach joins us in studio to chat about all things 2021 Texans and his vast career coaching wide receivers across the National Football League. David Culley next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. 6th and Peabody, our location. I hope our next guest writes a book because of all the stops that he has been at for a wide receivers coach, assistant head coach, offensive coach, across the NFL, some college as well, and former head coach of the Houston Texans from last year, David Culley, in studio with us, fresh off the golf course and here at 6th and Peabody before catching a flight. Coach Culley, great to have you in studio. Hope you're doing well.
Glad to be here. Always a good day when you're on the golf course.
For sure. A bit of a different feeling for you this offseason compared to last, right? It allows you to take a breather and go and play golf this time of year.
I wish I didn't have this breather, but I got it right after the season was over with. When I was released, I went and got double knee replacements, the first thing I did. And once I got double knee replacement, I got it done early because I figured that I may not be coaching this upcoming year. So I wanted to be able to play golf. So I said, I don't want to wait around to get it done. So I got it done early where I could come do what I'm doing right now, is play golf.
Are those scars a perfect match?
They're not a perfect match, but they are both well right now.
Yeah. Well, you're moving fine.
Oh, so you're not officially retired then? You're getting back into coaching?
Well, I'm not officially retired. I'm just taking a year off right now, and I'm just going to kind of go from there.
Do you see yourself right now as wanting to get back in and just waiting to see how things go? Or is it wanting to be retired and then I'll await the perfect offer to get back into coaching in some capacity?
Right now, I want to hit the golf ball better. And I didn't do that very well today. But I'm just going to, I did for 44 years. I had 16 years in college, 28 in the NFL. And it's the first time that this time of year that I wasn't coaching from end of the season till going through OTAs, going through the draft, going through the combine. First time in 28 years. And but the fact that I got both knees done, I did 7-week rehab, 3 days a week. They killed me. And I didn't think about anything else but getting my knees right. So it's been good. Do I miss it? Sure, I miss it. And people ask me all the time, all my buddies, I said, well, how do you feel about it right now? I said, right now, my knees hurt, And I says, they're hurting right now, not because of the double knee replacement. They're hurting right now because I'm playing too much golf because I need to do something to keep myself busy.
When you were hired, when you interviewed, what did the Texans tell you about Deshaun Watson?
Well, I really didn't talk much about Deshaun when I was hired. His situation really never came up during the hiring process. Once I got the job, then obviously we had a situation that wasn't ideal. Once I got the job, and I had a conversation with Deshaun after I got the job. I had one conversation with him for about 30 minutes, and all I'll say is after that 30-minute conversation I had with him, is I did not feel like going into the next year that he'll be playing for the Texans.
Next year being that current season.
That current season, yes.
Because people may forget the timeline. He requested a trade before any of the other legal mess happened, and he requested the trade just before you were hired as the head coach, if I'm getting the timeline right.
Yeah, you're right. And basically the conversation I had with him was about coming back and what his situation would be. He simply just said that I'm not going to play this year for the Texans. He says it has nothing to do with you or the new staff that was coming in here. I've made a decision. My team has made a decision that they're not going to do it. And he says if he needs to, he'll sit.
Did you get a one-on-one conversation with him, or was his agent present while you were having this conversation?
It was a one-on-one. It wasn't a one-on-one person-to-person. It was a Zoom call. They wouldn't let me go one-on-one person-to-person because they had already heard that I was pretty good one-on-one person-to-person.
Well, and look, they hired you, right? So obviously the Texans organization knew you're pretty good one-on-one with people. So when you look back at everything that transpired that led to you being a one-and-done coach, knowing everything that you know right now, do you still take the job, or do you stay doing what you were doing before?
Most definitely would take the job. When I took the job, I didn't take the job thinking it was going to be a one and done. At the end of the season, I didn't think it was going to be a one and done. At no time, from the time the season was over until the time I was released, did I ever feel like I wasn't going to be the head coach next year. Yes, I'd have taken the job. I got asked questions all the time about why did you take it? Why did you take it? With all the situation going on, I never felt like once I got into the situation, other than the situation that was going down with Deshaun, it really wasn't as bad as what everybody said it was. I mean, it really wasn't. The guys that were there, the guys that were coming back, the guys that were going to play for us, it was never an issue with Deshaun. The fact that he wasn't going to play and that he was still around, his presence was there, but it was not an issue, and it never was an issue with me. It never was an issue with the team. It was just that it was there.
You know John McClain well. We have him on weekly on this show. That's consistent with what he told us all season. He believed that you were coming back. He acted like people were crazy to speculate that you weren't going to get a second year as head coach of the Houston Texans. When they come to you after the season, coach, and say, hey, this is over after one season, do they get specific as to why they're letting you go, or is it just simple as, oh, we need to change of direction?
Well, no, you just said a thing there that was said to me that I sat down with Nick, the general manager, and he said that I think I'm going to go in a different direction. And I says, fine. I says, we talked, and he says, well, what's the reason? He said, philosophical differences. And from that point right there, I says, that's fine. Let me go talk to my staff, let them know what's going on, and then I'll go from there.
What do you think is different about your philosophy with that of Nick Caserio?
Oh, well, I think I think Nick and I were on the same page going into the year with everything that was going on. I think in the end, when the season was over, they wanted me to do some things with my staff that I was not going to do. I didn't feel like I needed to do. And in the end, 2 days later, after having that conversation, I was fired.
David Culley in studio with us. It was strange. We see guys have philosophical differences who don't want to change coaching staffs and move on. Mike Munchak here in Nashville comes to mind. What we don't see is from there the coach that's currently employed and other coaches stay on board because in reality the GM goes out and gets another guy from the outside and brings him in and has the guy he wants. So with Lovey, I know you're cool with Lovey and with Pep Hamilton.
Yes.
For them to stay and carry over, to me, just the 30,000-foot view, it was more than just David Culley wouldn't fire a certain coach. I don't know what it was behind the scenes, but it had to be more than just philosophical differences, didn't it?
I'm not sure. I never had the conversation. That was the only conversation I had. I never really got into it. I've been in the business long enough to know that when those guys make a decision, the decision is made. At that point, it didn't matter to me why. They didn't want me anymore to be there, and that was okay.
Did it feel like I'm projecting myself here in this and thinking, what happened after 1 year with everything going on with that roster and everything you had to deal with? It almost seems like, Coach, they were admitting fault or admitting a mistake by letting you go, by doing what they did and retaining other coaches and continuing with that. Did you let that seep in at all in terms of how you've looked at this now when you look back on your time in Houston?
No, I have not. I tell you what, I've learned in this business that you always look forward. You know that old saying, you guys know about the NFL, National Football League. It also means not for long. And you always have that in the back of your mind. And when decisions are made, right or wrong, or whether you like it or you don't like it, you live with those decisions. This wasn't the first time I've been fired. I've been there before. I've been in that John Gruden deal, the FCA, the Fired Coaches Association. I've been there before, so I understand it.
I'd love, if you can, to take us behind the scenes of the process of last offseason, the training camp, after the charges come out on Deshaun, and knowing that he didn't want to play for the organization to begin with, but he's on the roster. He's there so he does not get fined per day. And you have to figure out, as a part of the active roster, how you're going to use him or not use him on a daily basis. What were the conversations like behind the scenes? And did he show up to all the behind-the-scenes meetings as well, the team meetings, or was it just visually we saw what the cameras picked up? He's walking out to training camp practice, runs a couple of scout drills, and that was it. Was there more to it than that?
Yeah, he was at every meeting during training camp. He was at every practice during training camp. There was only a certain amount of things that he was only going to do during practice because of the injury factor. But he was there. He was in every meeting. he wasn't a distraction. He was just like everybody else there. But knowing that he wasn't, I think there was always hope that maybe he might change his mind. And, you know, we got to the point where once the season got started, he was still coming in the building, but he wasn't in our meetings anymore. There was no need for him to be in our meetings anymore because he was not going to be active. And we knew that going in, and we handled it that way. We knew we was going to have one less guy on our active roster that wasn't going to play during the year, and we understood that, and we dealt with it.
And now the idea is he's going to be suspended in some capacity for the Browns as they go into training camp. Your understanding, last year in Houston, like if he changed his mind and said, Coach, I've changed my mind, I want to play, the NFL would have allowed that? Like he could have played that week?
Yes, there was no reason for him not to be able to play other than he didn't want to play.
How involved in football was Jack Easterby, and how comfortable were you with his role?
Very comfortable with Jack. Jack basically was not involved in the football part of it per se. He was involved in more so the administrative, travel, our training room, our weight room, our player development. But as far as the actual football, Jack was never involved in that. And also, Jack was very positive. Jack was a very good ally of mine when I was down there. I enjoyed working with Jack.
What do you think of Brian Flores' lawsuit? And what do you think of the two guys who have joined it?
Well, I really have no comment on that other than the fact that I was asked to join it. I did not do it at that time. I didn't feel like it was something I needed to do. I backed Brian 100%. Obviously, he has his reasons for things. I had a conversation with him, but we didn't go any further than that. Basically, it's now in the lawyer's hands, and I've kind of left it at that.
You support him?
I do support him. I support him from the standpoint of I don't know all the exact reasons why he's doing what he's doing with the teams that he has filed the lawsuit with, but I understand where he's going with the lawsuit.
You mentioned those 44 years in coaching, the 44th being as your first shot as a head coach in the league. Just Brian Flores aside, personally, what has been your experience with wanting to be a head coach in the NFL or in college football? How difficult has that path been? When did you decide in your career, Coach, that, hey, I've done enough now where I can go and do this and be a head coach? How long did it take you from that point to land this opportunity? I
felt like when we left Philadelphia with Andy Reid and went to Kansas City, that at that point I felt like I was ready. And I knew at some point if it came along, I was ready. I had conversations with Andy, and he felt like I was ready. I was on a staff that had guys that became head coaches, and that I basically they played for me before. They got into business with me. They went on and became head coaches, done very well. And I just knew that if that opportunity ever came up, I'd be ready for it. And I'll say this, when it did come up last year, I loved every minute of being the head coach of the Houston Texans. People asked about the doing the things that we're doing here with you all now, the interviews every week, the TV deals, all those kind of things. Loved every minute of it. Looked forward to going to doing that. And it was everything I thought it would be. And I always felt like that this was exactly where I needed to be, where I wanted to be. And right now, the big thing that I miss about it, I miss being a head coach. I miss being that. I missed that whole deal when I was there. You know.
As the head coach, did you miss the day-to-day coaching aspect of a position? I mean, your history at wide receiver is well known. And to get your hands on a specific position and actually work the guys during practice instead of from time to time observing or doing the things that head coaches are forced to do more than they are just coaching on a daily basis? I was
to the point in my career where I was ready to coach coaches and not players anymore. And that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I allowed those guys to do. When I became head coach, I was a head coach. I wasn't the head coach of the offense or the defense. I was a head coach of the football team. I allowed my coordinators to do their jobs, their offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coach to do their job. They knew what I wanted. They knew how I wanted things done. We had conversations and talks all the time in coaches' meeting about this is how I want things to go. And, you know, you don't have to do it my way, but this is what I want done. And that's what I've always looked forward to, and that's what I loved about it. Practice every day, interaction with the players. I remember the first day I went on the field as a head coach during the OTAs. I go out on the football field. We do our stretching, then we come up and we break and we go. And I'm sitting there saying, where do I go? I mean, everybody's going in all directions. And I'm sitting there and I'm saying, where do I go? Being an offensive football coach my whole career, the first thing I did, I went right to the defense. And I did that because I didn't want those guys on offense or the guys on defense thinking, oh, here's an offensive coach. He's spending all his time over there. I went right with Lovey to the defense. They were hitting a sled. And just to let you know, is I was getting ready to hit that sled, which would have been a mistake, when they were doing it, just to show them that I'm all in with you all. And then finally, Lovey came up to me and says, Coach, I don't know if you really want to do that right now. So I didn't.
So, Andy Reid, Bill Parcells, the list is long of guys that are legendary that you've crossed paths with, you've worked with over the course of your football career. When you get the head coaching job, what was the advice that they gave you about managing coaches? You said you wanted to coach coaches and not necessarily players at that point. You wanted that opportunity. What was the biggest piece of advice they gave you, or was it simply you watching and learning from them that was the advice you needed?
Well, watching and learning was good, but the two things, you mentioned two guys there. Andy Reid, the one thing I learned from Andy Reid was consistency. He's not only as a head football coach, but as a human being. The thing about Coach Parcells is I actually, after I got the job, probably before OTA started, I actually went to Saratoga Springs to visit Coach Parcells. And we sat down for a whole day and had a conversation. And the thing that he said to me was, do it your way and be yourself and keep coaching them. And that was advice. And with Andy Reid, it was like consistency. And then I'll mention another guy that was very influential in me, two guys really, John Harbaugh and Ozzie Newsome when I was in Baltimore. I'll say this, and no disrespect to any of the organizations I've been with, but it was the best from top to bottom, the best place I've worked since I've been in the league. No disrespect to any place I've ever worked, simply because of the way they did the business. And with John Harbaugh, of course, I had coached against Jim as a player. I knew his dad. And just the advice they gave me was to be yourself. Be yourself and do it your way.
So they let you do what you were hired to do.
They let me do what I was hired to do.
Did the Rooney Rule help you, do you think, and what do you think of it overall?
Obviously the Rooney Rule hasn't worked like it should work or was intended to work. I don't think that the Rooney Rule had anything to do with me being hired at that time. It was the only interview I had in my career as a head coach. And that interview came not because of they were looking – I had to interview a minority coach that I already interviewed for. So I think they're doing some things right now with the Rooney Rule that may help. But here's the thing I've always felt about the Rooney Rule. The Rooney Rule basically needs to go to the top, to the ownership. Not the general managers, it's the ownership. In the end, those are the guys that in the end make decisions on yes or no, on who the general manager wants to hire, who they don't want to hire. And it's their mindset and their attitude about how they see the football team and how they see the guy coming in that's being interviewed for the coach. It's them. It's them. And I think they just got to see the big picture. I think the league is doing something now about bringing in guys. They have some kind of coaching thing that they're doing now, and they're bringing in so many guys. And they're coming in and they're coming in and they're talking to ownership, not the general managers. Not the people in the administration. They're talking to the ownership to get a feel for what you are and what you're not about. Here's one thing about coaching and hiring coaches, and I always felt like this way. I very rarely would ever want to hire somebody I didn't know or somebody that I know didn't know them. And I know that's how they feel. If they don't have a feel for you and they don't really feel comfortable with you, there's as a head coach or as a coach working with somebody, if you don't feel comfortable with them and if you don't know them, the one big thing I always said you wanted to have on your staff is you want to have trust. But you wanted guys to trust you.
Weren't you and the other four minorities that interviewed with the Texans dealing to a degree with Cal McNair, or was it all Caserio?
No, it was Cal and Nick. I actually interviewed with Nick twice, and then I interviewed with Nick and Cal. Cal, Miss McNair, and his wife.
You mentioned the Ravens were the best organization or your favorite organization you've been a part of and been around. Why? Well, what was different about how they ran things in Baltimore that made them your favorite? Well,
other places had that. I had that in Philly. I had it in Buffalo. I had it in Kansas City, the places I've been. Pittsburgh, which is another team way back when that I was with. It's the culture. I mean, the culture. There's a trust that you saw coaches have, you saw players have, you saw the city that team had in the organization, starting with the ownership and then trickling on down to the general manager. At that time, Ozzie Newsome. And then with John Harbaugh being the head coach, they did things, as you would say, the right way. There was a straightforward way about doing things. There was a culture there that was established that I loved.
So the Texans are now named in this lawsuit that just as of today with the news. You mentioned culture in Baltimore. Was there anything different or vastly different about your experience with the Houston Texans from a culture standpoint as opposed to the rest of the league?
No, nothing different. I had to establish the culture that we wanted to establish there. Obviously, I wouldn't have been the head coach there if things were okay. If things needed to change. And basically, I felt like that that football team did everything that our coaching staff asked them to do. They were everything we wanted them to be. And I go back and I look at it. I look back over the season, and I sit here and I look and I see how they played, how they finished, and those kinds of things. And as a coach, all you want to do is know that they're going to go out and give you their best all the time, do the things that you want done. And I felt like they did that for me. Now, were there some guys on that football team that you didn't really reach? Yeah, I had guys on there, but I also got rid of those guys, But the point was that it was established. I felt like it was established. I think it's established right there right now. And I think Lovey will do a great job of continuing what we started there, because he was there with me, understanding exactly what we wanted done.
David Culley in studio with us, former Texans head coach. One of those guys you got rid of was Zach Cunningham. The minute you released him, did you know he could end up very easily in the division based on relationships he has?
I didn't know if he'd end up in the division. I know he's going to end up on a football team real quickly because he's a heck of a football player. And he's a good person also. Obviously, he had a relationship with Mike here with the Titans, and Mike knew him very well, actually coached him. And, he was that's part of it. But the point was I start talking about culture. And, basically the reason that I made the decision to release Zach was that Zach wasn't doing the things in our culture that we wanted to done. Was he a heck of a football player, and did we miss him? Of course we did. But the big picture was that wasn't going to help us move forward. And, obviously he came here, did a nice job with them, and he's a heck of a football player. He's one of the best linebackers in the league, and, I was happy for him.
What can Davis Mills be as the starting quarterback for the Texans in the NFL?
He can be a playoff caliber quarterback in this league. I felt good coming into the next year knowing that I had Davis Mills coming back. He came in when he did. Obviously, he had to play a lot sooner than we wanted him to play because Tyrod got hurt. He had a little tough going there for those first 6 or 7 ball games, and then Tyrod came back, and Tyrod wasn't the same, so I made the decision to go with Davis at the end of the year. And he did a heck of a job. I will say this about him now. Looking back at the draft class last year, looking at the draft class coming this year, this is how I feel about Davis Mills. If Davis Mills was coming out of the draft this year, he'd be the number 1 quarterback picked.
Do you think you've got a lot of background with wide receivers? We saw 3 big wide receivers in Hill and Adams and Brown move to giant contracts in new places. You see that as a trend, or are there so many good wide receivers coming out of college that we're going to see teams willing to move on after 3 or 4 good years of a wide receiver because they think they're replaceable with guys coming in from college and having immediate impact?
Well, I think a lot of that depends on the philosophy of your football team. If you're a football team that's throwing the ball all the time, and you got those guys, you keep them happy by doing that. And then when you got special guys, and you just mentioned 3 guys right there, those guys are special players, really good players. I know the guy here, A.J. Brown. I loved A.J. coming out. I think he's a heck of a football player. But again, when you look at the big picture, and those guys are to earn the right to be paid what they're getting ready to get paid and the contracts that they got. But here's the thing is that how many times do those guys touch that ball? And so when you are deciding the makeup of your entire football team, and you've got to put the kind of money that these guys command and that they deserve, are you willing to do that and give up some other things? And some teams aren't willing to do that at that position.
What do you think of Cleveland giving Deshaun the contract that they gave him, structured the way they did? If he gets suspended now this year, he might lose the 16, 17 games if they suspend him for a season. But they structured it where his base salary is only $1 million plus. And so what he loses money-wise is next to nothing in the framework of the large contract.
Mm-hmm. I'm not really sure what the details of his contract was. I just know this. I know why they gave him the contract. I mean, he's a heck of a player. I know when I was coming in after the interview for that job, I was coming in to interview a job where the guy's a top 5 quarterback in this league. And, he's a special player. And obviously they saw the same thing and was willing to take that risk with him. And they're looking at it long term, not short term.
How close was that deal to getting done last year with Miami?
I don't know how close it was, but I do know we had a conversation. I had a conversation with Nick and the night before the trade deadline, and it was 50-50. And then the next day, it was done. It wasn't done, and whatever. I don't know what happened, but it didn't get done.
Put in perspective for us, because you've had the view that we would not have. Can you describe, maybe there's a behind-the-scenes story, a non-game day story of Lamar Jackson and the type of leader he is in Baltimore?
Well, I tell you what, I know this. Those players on that football team will go through a wall for that guy. He comes to work every day. He's a tremendous human being. A lot of people keep trying to say he can't do this, he can't do that. I've never been around in my 28 years in this league anybody more special at that position. The only guy I've been around that was close during his prime was Michael Vick. And I've had conversations with Michael. Lamar is another level. Completely another level. And you can win a championship with that guy. And he is all about winning. He is not about anything else. He is all about winning. And that franchise, as long as he's the quarterback, is going to have a chance to compete for a Super Bowl.
You coaching this time next year?
I'm not sure. I know this. I'll have to start hitting the golf ball a lot better than I am right now because that will put me back into coaching if I don't start hitting it better. If I start hitting it better, we'll see.
But NFL?
NFL. I'll only coach in the NFL.
Okay. NFL only. Coach David Culley has been our guest in studio. This has been a real treat for us. We appreciate you coming in.
I appreciate you asking me.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
We will recap what Coach Culley had to say, plus we'll get into some other headlines of the day. That's all straight ahead on OutKick 360. Our thanks to former Texans head coach David Culley, who just joined us in studio here at 6th and Peabody. If you missed a portion of that, podcast is always available wherever you download your audio. Just search out OutKick 360. Monday edition rolls on. I love his honesty, and you can tell that he feels like he should still be the head coach of the Houston Texans based on the way last year went down, the way he felt it was going into the offseason, and to get that call from Caserio and to be told they have philosophical differences because he wouldn't make a coaching change. To me, that's strange given the fact that they just turned around and hired Lovie Smith and kept Pep Hamilton on as in charge of the offense. And he's running the quarterbacks.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense at all. I mean, if they had fired him and made some dramatic change to Josh McDaniels or a Caserio person, that was what we all thought was coming, right? We thought McDaniels or we thought Gerard Mayo.
Yes.
If it had been a move like that, you say, well, he was a sacrificial lamb that went into a bad situation and got screwed. He went into a bad situation and got screwed and got replaced by one of his deputies. It's bizarre.
Well, it's tough just meeting David Culley for the first time and having that long conversation to imagine him having many enemies around the league. And John McClain talked about that a lot, how well-liked he is around the league and easy to get along with. We certainly saw that in that interview. I mean, bottom line is David Culley got screwed by the Texans.
Put in a terrible situation.
I mean, look, we can sit here and talk about money. He's going to be paid handsomely, to walk away after a year, and he got very rich off the Houston Texans. But he's not in this for the money. I mean, 44 years, and his 44th year was his first as a head coach. And he thought 15, 20 years before he was ready to be a head coach. Sacrificial lamb or not, the guy got hosed.
Absolutely.
He got a raw deal. He got one season in an intolerable situation in Houston for anyone to have any success. He had very little success, as was expected, had no off-field issues that we're aware of, and he got fired after 1 year. And Hutton, like you said, they promote guys who were with him in the organization.
Well,
it makes no sense.
Couldn't have been their plan.
No. And here's the other thing. We've forgotten about this because the Deshaun Watson story has moved to Cleveland. But Houston is a sick organization. I mean, Davis Mills maybe is a nice mid-tier quarterback. I'm not totally against the idea that you give the guy a shot, but this organization doesn't have much talent. It doesn't have much of a plan. It's still got Easterby, who's one of the great mysteries of the league and a meddler and whatever, by all accounts, except for David Culley, who's playing nice. That organization's got a lot of issues, and Lovie Smith ain't going to fix them.
Yeah, and they have 3 first-round picks coming from Cleveland as well that will help supplement some things. Yeah, right. But in the meantime, it's a wait and see. And can Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton have success given the way the roster's currently built?
They've got another coach next year.
OutKick 360 rolls on. Second hour of the Monday edition. OutKick 360 rolls on from Nashville, 6th and Peabody, our location, with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Our thanks to former Texans head coach David Culley for joining us in the first hour. If you want his take on what the 2021 season behind the scenes was like with the Houston Texans, you can find the podcast wherever you download your audio post-show at OutKick 360. Also, hit the subscribe button to our YouTube channel if you want to watch the interview as well. Speaking of the Texans and tying it back into Deshaun Watson, so the disciplinary hearing will begin for Watson tomorrow. That is with disciplinary officer Sue Robinson, who is appointed through the NFL and the NFLPA to recommend/hand down discipline, which Roger Goodell will then implement formally, one way or the other. This takes place tomorrow. I had not seen an official, the investigation, the independent investigation has concluded.
But it
to
must
this point.
have.
Yeah, but it's got to be over now if you're going to now take the findings and interview Watson.
They've said for like 3 weeks, I feel like it's wrapping up. Should have a conclusion to the investigation soon.
Right.
But I'm with you. I haven't heard specifically the investigation is closed or they're finished with the investigation.
But
it's just they're nearing it in.
It must be. I wonder if they're just not going to say that, or if they're going to let us presume it, or if that's coming today. Is there anything, and I haven't seen anything in what I've read saying how long this is expected to go? Is it a one-day thing? Is it a multiple-day thing? Anticipated, obviously.
The only thing that has been reported is it is slated to begin Tuesday. It doesn't say how long it's expected to go. But this is right in line with the week before July 4th and trying to get everything done and, for lack of a better way to put this, like wrapped up and packaged and put to the side for the NFL's perspective going into training camp at the end of next month.
So what do we envision this as? It's her sitting with him, discussing what the findings were, and then mulling it and delivering her penalty.
Yes.
Maybe she hears from the league and the PA. We don't know if they're going to be allowed to be heard from.
Yeah, it's up to her.
She can if she wants.
Yeah, she can if she wants. And the reports were at the beginning of last week and then the week prior that the NFL wanted to present their side of things, lobbying for a lengthy suspension, a season-long at least type suspension, and that the NFLPA was preparing for an unprecedented suspension that they would appeal based on prior precedent in, if matters not close to this, but
the ownership
issues that either have not been addressed or are addressed with not much going on from the league's perspective. So that's now the timeline here. 20 of the 24 suits, civil suits, have been wrapped up. They've been settled, and that came through the attorney, not for Watson, but for those accusing him of this. He was saying that they've wrapped up 20 of the 24, and news came down this morning that the Texans have been added to the suit for quote-unquote enabling Watson, and went into certain details from one specific massage therapist who said that she had alerted the Texans of this by March of 2020, I believe is the time frame. And, of course, all the news came out in what was like April, May, June, somewhere in the late spring, early summer, if my timeline's correct, of 2021, of last year.
Yeah.
So, and for those wondering, like I saw someone wanted to ask about the Texans lawsuit on behalf, while we had Culley in here. Culley wasn't there for the timeline that this lawsuit is pointing to. That would have been O'Brien that previous year and staff. And that's why he said, we were trying to establish our own culture. He can't speak to the culture that was there prior to him getting hired. Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. One quick note, and this was made by Pro Football Talk over the weekend. So contractually, here's how it would work. Based on what I read from Florio at the site, at Pro Football Talk, about Watson's contract, based on the way the NFLPA has structured things and the disciplinary actions that could come, if it's for the full season, his contract will then toll another year. So everything moves up 1 year, if that makes sense. Back 1 year, yeah. So his contract's set to expire in 2026. It would now expire in 2027 if he doesn't reach an accrued season for 2022.
Which is 6 games, I think.
So, I mean, if he gets the full season, or if it's suspended indefinitely, which is what many are anticipating coming down, then who knows what we're looking at from a monetary suspension. But it's not like he's not missing any of the money of the fully guaranteed contract. It's just pushed back a calendar year for when he will receive it.
But that pushes back his 2001 year contract to 2022 contract to 2023. So that $1 million base moves.
Right.
So how does the suspension money work? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
suspend him off his base.
The way it has been reported,
and then it tolls.
The way it was reported, whenever he had the fully guaranteed contract, was it was structured as though that first year base salary was awfully suspicious for what they thought he would be missing out on in year number 1. Although at the time, no one thought he was going to be suspended for a full season, which would then toll the contract forward a year instead of moving forward with just $1 million lost. I mean, if it continues to toll forward, he's never going to, I mean, unless it's a true voidable type suspension, which I don't know if that's been reported or if it's even coming close to being a voidable contract based on the fully guaranteed money that he signed up for and that the Browns gave him. I mean, I don't know if he'll ever miss out on much of the contract that's going to be paid.
I think it just happens this way. He makes no money in 2022 outside of what he's pocketed as signing bonus.
Right.
And plus his contract gets pushed back. So the big base that's scheduled to come in 2023 doesn't come. So the low base year gets pushed back. Everything gets pushed back. So he makes no money because he's suspended for the entire year, if he is, hypothetically. Makes no money in the first year because of the suspension. And then he only makes that low base that was scheduled for the first year in the actual first year when he's playing.
Yeah, but it's not, I want to stress this, it's not really hurting him in the bank.
Well, he's got the
He will have not played over the last 2 years, hypothetically now, and he would have made $54 million over those 2 seasons of not
$10 million
playing.
from last year, and he got 47.
He had $44 million in a signing bonus from the Browns.
So 54.
It's I don't know what you guys make about the reporting on all this and how everything is going down, but to me, it's just further evidence that none of this is necessarily about what's right or just. I'm talking about what the Browns have done in this guaranteed contract. I'm talking about what has happened to the Texans and what could continue to happen to the Texans. I'm not talking about the victims' rights or any of that. This is all now coming down to the report out over the weekend. The NFL is going to push for at least a year suspension, at least a 1-season suspension. To me, it's just what's going to save the most face for the league. What can we do to not look light on this sort of stuff?
It's kind of funny also. The NFL is
isn't the reporting weird? Like the NFL is going to push for at least a season. And I'm thinking, okay, it's the NFL's decision. What do you mean push?
Right. The NFL is going to push her
then just do it.
For a year because it wants her to do most of the damage when Roger Goodell ultimately can adjust it to whatever it wants. So if she comes back with 14 games, he can add 3. They can get the year that they want.
Right.
But they'd rather he only add 3 games than she come back with 12 and he have to add 5, or she come back with 10 and he have to add 7.
Right.
They want her to take the brunt of it instead of him taking the brunt.
They want the independent disciplinary person, whoever's in that role,
to take the hit.
To recommend the suspension that the NFL wants, so it can just point to, well, we appointed this, but the NFLPA agreed to appoint Sue Robinson to this position. It's jointly agreed on, and this is her call based on the investigation that she had and based on the independent investigation that was handed to her. So it's,
but they can get what they want, whether she does it or not. By him doing it.
I don't think any of it is about, they're not being honest if they're saying, well, we want to do what's right by the victims and against Deshaun Watson. It's all this big game of saving face.
Yes.
That's what's taking place right now. We can't appear to be lighter on any type of alleged sexual crime than Major League Baseball was with Trevor Bauer. We can't seem this way. But we all know at the end of all of this that there's going to be a bunch of people pissed one way or the other.
I also think
if he's not banned from football, there's going to be people that's going to be tweeting about how he should be banned from the game for life.
I also think the Browns, we've touched on this before, did some of this to themselves. Because if they didn't do that contract thing, maybe the league would be a little less inclined.
Agree.
Maybe the public would be a little less outcry. If he had a $20 million base this year, and he was going to lose 12 of it based on the suspension, then maybe people would feel justice in a 10-game suspension.
It's a great point, Paul, and here's why.
A substantial amount of money.
What that contract did was took the other owners off of your side if you're the Browns. Typically, the owners would say, I don't want the league necessarily giving a top 5 quarterback a 1-year suspension without criminal charges. Because what if that's my top 5 quarterback eventually? They all look at it through their own lens. Well, what if this happens to me? If there's some sort of scandal with one of my players, I don't want the league with that level of power to take my franchise player away for a year when there's no criminal charges. Well, when the Browns set that precedent with the guaranteed money, now the league is saying, let's set the other precedent. Hammer this guy. That way we can always go back when we're dealing with agents and say, this is why we don't give guaranteed dollars.
Too dangerous.
Because Deshaun Watson got suspended for 2 years or for a season and a half or a full or whatever it is. That, to me, took the other 31 owners off the side of the Browns and on the side of throw the book at Deshaun Watson. And that's not a good place to be for the Browns.
Well, we're headed to the fully guaranteed money for the top guys.
Clean top guys.
Well, yeah. Say. I mean, absolutely. I mean, but that's who's not right now.
Right.
So I would say that the upper echelon quarterbacks are going to have the leverage to ask for the fully guaranteed money. You know, the base salary, it had, I can understand for those that would say, from a monetary standpoint, it's got to give the Browns some type of flexibility moving forward on the deal to structure it the way they did. But it also, I mean, in the timeline and how everything worked out, where according to the reports, Watson had the Browns listed, third? Maybe fourth on the.
They were first out, right? A 5 or a 4.
And then all of a sudden things changed. And it's because of the fully guarantees and the way things were structured in the player's favor. So I can understand.
The Browns did what they had to do to get Deshaun Watson to agree to go to Cleveland.
Yeah, and look, the way it's structured this year, it gives them flexibility because they're paying Baker Mayfield $18 million, whether they want to or not. They're going to pay part of that salary to trade him, or they're going to cut him, and it's going to count that against the cap. So they wanted some flexibility on that first year of Watson's mega deal in order to be able to make things work and not lose out on multiple contracts or not be able to extend another player this offseason they wanted to. So that all plays into the idea of why they had to structure it the way they did. But first and foremost, it was to lure the quarterback that they wanted because they were so desperate for one to Cleveland. Because if not, we're talking about, well, we absolutely could be talking about the Miami Dolphins quarterback from last year. We're also discussing possibly the Atlanta Falcons quarterback, the Carolina Panthers quarterback. I mean, there's a lengthy list of teams that were interested that maybe didn't make the top 4. Seattle comes to mind, but Watson had the no trade clause, so he controlled all of these options and ultimately picked Cleveland after it was reported that the guy who controlled where he went didn't want to go there. And then he still ends up getting the first-round picks and everything that was traded away for him. So it's a mess. The Browns brought it on themselves, but at the time, the presser, when they had one of the general managers, not the general manager, one of the front office guys there discussing the contract itself with Watson sitting there, he said, look, we have an open line to the NFL, and we're monitoring this entire process. So when they traded for him, they knew he could possibly be suspended. I don't think there's a chance that they thought he would be suspended for the season.
I don't either. I mean, it wasn't in the ether.
And we still don't know the timeline of when we will hear something. All we know is the hearing starts tomorrow for Watson, which is and that goes with the timeline that we've heard that they want to get this wrapped up well before training camp. The appeal process and then Goodell's ruling on the appeal, that can happen very fast because my guess is the NFLPA, Watson, and others already have the appeal written and ready to go. It's just filling in the blanks on how long the suspension is going to be, on what they want to appeal to. That's it. Because the argument is going to be the same, with or without the full season, 6 games, 4 games, whatever. Don't you think? Like it's that should happen very, very fast.
The appeal should already be written out.
Avs win the Cup last night. Colorado wins on the road in Tampa, and they closed it out. Final score of 2-1. They damaged the Cup in the process. It's all banged up and beaten up, but that's part of the
charm.
There is a charm to that. The Cup like I'm watching that and I'm thinking
that's not a ding. I mean
but I'm thinking like so
flattening.
Should it be that easy to damage?
That's a pretty big fall.
Not really. I mean, the guy's skating and he's like coming in for the group photo and it falls down. Like, we've seen the Lombardi Trophy tossed from boat to boat. And this could barely be, it tips over and there's a dent in it. And I'm thinking, is this?
Well, Gronk had soft hands.
Yeah, soft hands, and it would have fallen into water, not frozen water.
Well, it could have fallen. It could have hit the boat. Would be the worst damage it could have done on the way over. But, Gronk caught it like he'd catch an egg. He accepted the trophy on the throw.
But I'm thinking
that ice did not accept that cup.
There are harder metals that this thing could be made out of, though, is my point. If it's going to be that fragile, you shouldn't allow them to have a day with the cup if it's honestly that fragile.
What was the material on Game of Thrones? Valyrian steel? You prefer that the Stanley Cup be made of Valyrian steel?
Yeah, but I like the fact that it's scratched up and dinged. I just don't want it like caved in that easily.
Colorado was amazing in that third period. They allowed Tampa Bay 2 shots while they're holding on to the 2-1 lead before they pulled the goalie. Totally deserved it. I mean, Tampa Bay was out of gas, and Colorado speed, skill, and some creativity that just took it to another level.
I was getting nervous for Colorado when Tampa scores, 4 minutes into that game, it's up 1-0, and I'm thinking they're about to send this thing. They're at home. That place is rocking. I love how they go to Hammer Time by MC Hammer when they score a goal. And I'm thinking this thing's going to go back to Colorado for a Game 7. And you can be real nervous at that point with that 3-1 lead, and it evaporates to a team that's going for a third straight Stanley Cup. And instead, Colorado, I mean, that's the response you want to see with what happened after that first goal.
Stan Kroenke gets his second championship in 5 months?
Pretty impressive.
He owns the Rams. Technically, his wife is in charge of the Avalanche because as the owner of the Rams, he cannot also own another top pro sports franchise. But he's getting the credit for his second because everyone knows who's in charge there. Just like his son runs the Nuggets, right?
Sure.
So it's in the family. And Kroenke, it's crazy how the ebbs and flows of championships, seasons and cities. So Tampa has the run with the Bucks and the Lightning. The Rays have certainly been very good over the recent years. Boston had all the runs where they were stacking up back and forth between sports.
The Bruins, Celtics, and Red Sox won in the same year or back-to-back years at one point.
Horrible
in the early
stretch
2010s, I believe, was the time that was happening.
You've got Atlanta winning, but you had the Dodgers close. The Dodgers have been good. Of course, the Rams win. But now I'm tying in the ownership, too, where you can have – everything comes in numbers. It's not just a one-off. And, here's Kroenke living the life. Meanwhile, ties to Denver and L.A.
making a couple bucks off of that.
Not
Poor
bad
guy.
either. Yeah. This is also the third title since, 2001 for Colorado?
Yeah. It's a good organization.
Yeah. That's consistency.
I've always kind of liked them. I like their look. I like the colors.
You like those colors?
When they're good,
like Dennis Leary. You like that? Huh?
When they're good, they're good.
Okay.
When they're good to watch.
I like it's weird.
Third since 96. It was 96, and then 2001 was also the year.
Well, I mean, now let's count trophies for the Denver Broncos also, if we want to go back to 96 with the 97, 98 back-to-back.
Yeah.
The Super Bowls, and then Peyton winning one.
Denver's not a bad sports town, but the Broncos have been pretty bad for a decent while now.
I mean, I wouldn't say they're a bad organization. It's
a
mediocre,
good organization.
But
they've never bottomed out.
They're not the bad
Jets.
run now.
I mean,
to their standard,
they're not the Houston Texans. Let's put it that way. Even though the Houston Texans had a nice run of divisions.
To their standard, they've been poor recently with the quarterback problem.
Who's the next city now? If it was Boston and Tampa.
It could be Denver.
Is Denver with Russell Wilson?
I mean, they're not out of the conversation.
How the Nugs looking coming up? Are we about to enter a Nuggets or dynasty?
It could be New York. The Yankees could be back. Rangers went to the semis. I hate the Mets.
I
but
just
the
love
Mets
how it pisses you off when I
competitive.
mention the Mets as being really good.
Knicks aren't
Well,
doing
it could also
anything.
be L.A.
The Nets could
it could be the Rams and Dodgers.
Nets could conceivably do something.
Can you be that city without having an NFL team be part of it?
Well,
because New York does not have that right now.
Well,
with either the Jets or the Giants.
No. Well, the Jets are on the upswing at least. Giants.
I mean, if by upswing you mean they were rock bottom and there's only one way to go. But I'm not looking at that franchise and thinking.
No, you're not taking
really
title.
Good. They had a great draft. I like the draft they just had, but I don't think Zach Wilson, is Andrew Luck when he was starting out his career either. He's still very much a question mark.
Well, I think if you're New York and the Yankees win a World Series and the Rangers win a Stanley Cup, New York's in that. Yeah. I mean, that would be a massive thing for any other city.
Yes.
You can't downgrade New York just because the Jets they have so many teams and they haven't won at a higher
because
rate.
They have that many teams, though. I mean, I feel like you got to get a third sport involved to really. I mean, Boston had the third sport. They had a reign with Celtics, Red Sox, and Bruins.
If the Red Sox and the Bruins won, we'd never hear the end of it from Boston.
Right. Patriots
but
were also
if the
involved in
Patriots are down now and the Red Sox and the Bruins won, you'd hear a bleep ton out of Boston for how great they were. And any other city.
Yeah, I guess. But I still would have to throw a third sport in there. Right? I mean, even if it was the Patriots down, it would need to be Red Sox, Bruins, Celtics.
It would need to be the Nets in New York's case, right? That's the most likely scenario, and I'm not counting on that.
There's so many teams to pick. I mean, Islanders, what if the Islanders get hot? We claiming that? I mean,
yeah, I mean they would.
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying though. Like that's
claim Buffalo.
That's where I downgrade.
Yeah, the Bills. How about that?
Sabres.
All right. Bills.
Sabres count.
Bills, Yankees, Rangers.
Bills, Yankees, Rangers. There it is.
I mean, it's been a great time for my Rangers and my Sabres. What a time to be a New Yorker.
Nobody.
I get to watch Josh Allen on Sunday, and I get to watch the Rangers play on Saturday night.
Nobody.
What a time to be alive.
In New York City is claiming.
Oh, I know.
Buffalo.
More people in Erie, Pennsylvania are claiming Buffalo than New Yorkers.
Yeah, Cleveland.
New York City people.
Davey brings up a good point. Denver also has the NBA MVP in town. So there is a buzz. They may not have a title
It's a
with
good
the Nuggets,
sports town.
yeah.
And they've got the biggest footprint of any sports town in America, right? I mean, you look at the map.
Can I be completely honest about today's NBA? I have a hard time differentiating between the Nuggets and the Mavericks because they're both, I feel like, built on the same principle of spread 5 guys out around the three-point line with European players mixed in. And they're just very similar franchises to me.
You know what differentiates them to me?
You say that, and I'm like, oh, yeah, Jokic was the MVP. But now, is he a Mav? Or I had to think for a second. Is he a Nug or a Mav?
Use this.
Oh, he's a Nug.
Use this. Mark Cuban's on Shark Tank. That helps me.
That helps. Well, Mark Cuban's celebrity status helps from an ownership perspective.
I watch too much Shark Tank.
I get about equally excited about the
Shark
Nuggets
Tank's great.
and the Mavericks.
You ever sit down what's your default? If I sit down, like the first thing I turn my TV to many nights is CNBC because I know there's a repeat of Shark Tank. Then I build from there.
See, I'm having a hard time. Maybe I need to take suggestions. I'm having a hard time outside of sports finding something that's completely kid-friendly across the board to turn on
Shark Tank.
when kids are running around.
Shark Tank works.
Some of those networks, I'm going to sound like a prudish old man right now. Sure. The commercials on some of like ESPN even, that black phone booth movie, I almost had nightmares watching the trailer for that during a network spot on a Sunday night baseball game when they go to it.
Maybe I need to watch that.
I'm having to cover Evie's eyes. Like, don't look at the screen right now. You're not going to sleep for a week when you see this guy.
Maybe I'll watch that and get the 12U baseball out of my head.
Chad's going from Sunday school teacher yesterday to preaching next Sunday in the pulpit.
Hey, I'm a deacon now. I'm a Stephen.
Could you imagine if he was
minister.
the deacon with Hutton, Kuharski, and Deacon Chad Withrow?
Oh my gosh. That would not be good for anyone. Let me pray over you.
Yes. You can bless this show.
Yeah.
Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360.
Our recipe.
I remember one time my finger dislocates a lot in a basketball game, and it dislocated. It was completely out of socket.
You prayed over
on a hard foul. And yes, a guy at the church. Can I pray over that for a second? And I'm thinking, man, I'm in a lot of pain right now. I'd love to get home.
Anything.
My finger's going the opposite direction, and I'm trying to pop it back. But I mean, the only answer is sure.
Make it quick.
Why not? He comes over and puts his hand on my dislocated finger and prays over it with the entire gym during a basketball game.
Did it work?
I mean, my finger works, so I guess so.
He corrected it.
Yep.
Coming up, first-year NFL coaches. We talked with one and done with David Culley.
I can't wait.
We discuss the first-year coaches we are on the lookout for across the NFL. That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. I wrote last week at OutKick.com about Mike McDaniel, and just based on the whole structure of that organization right now, I'm rooting for him to have success. Because I think the consensus is, if it's not a one and done, it's close to it as they determine what they want to do at quarterback and head coach. And there's something to the idea of them wanting Sean Payton. We certainly know where there's smoke, there's fire in regards to Tom Brady. And I'm not saying he plays there anymore, but there's some involvement there in some capacity. And Mike McDaniel is there. He inherits a team that also has Tua Tagovailoa going into a make-it-or-break-it year based on the way his contract's structured off of the NFL draft and his rookie contract in Miami. That being said, McDaniel's on a list with first-time head coaches with Matt Eberflus, Brian Daboll with the Giants, Nathaniel Hackett, who is now in Denver, and Kevin O'Connell, who is the new head coach of the Minnesota Vikings. We have other new coaches across the league, guys who have had opportunities prior and are back in it. And here's Mike McDaniel, the guy that I said looks more like the guy who you would go down the hallway for at work at the office to fix your computer, who just arrived 30 minutes prior because he woke up late, instead of the guy who's going to deliver a message to the 53-man locker room and currently the 90-man meeting room going out to training camp. What do you guys make of the first-year crop, and where does McDaniel fit into all this?
I like the vibe from McDaniel. I like where he comes from. He's part of a good tree. And I actually feel like he's going to have success, but I contradict myself because I don't like his quarterback. And I don't think Tua is going to be an NFL success. I think this year's Miami story is going to be that they gave him every chance and that he turns out to be average to slightly above average quarterback that shows that you need better than that. And I think this whole list, and you add in even the guys now who Peterson, McDaniels, Dennis Allen, Lovie Smith, who are new coaches but not first-time head coaches. I think I asked that question about all of them. Who's your quarterback? And so who's in the best shape there? Nathaniel Hackett's in pretty damn good shape coming in with Russell Wilson. Doug Peterson should be in pretty good shape with Trevor Lawrence, who we didn't see much from in his first year, but we're all giving him a pass. And certainly Josh McDaniels. I like his quarterback situation in Vegas with Carr. Those are the three guys who should come out at the top of this list. I'd put McDaniel right after that.
So of the retread guys, and I enjoyed your piece, Hutton, on McDaniel, that's my vote too because he's so different. I like to see when different succeeds because maybe that leads to some different ways of thinking for other coaches and other owners and GMs, how they hire.
Does the better.
Yeah, and maybe we get some more entertainment out of the hires moving forward with certain owners when they have an opening if Mike McDaniel has a lot of success. Of the retreads, the only guy that I'm really rooting for is Doug Peterson, only because I truly believe he deserves it because he won a Super Bowl. And it's been very odd that he hasn't had more opportunities, right? I mean, I know it hasn't been that long, but if there's someone I look at and I think, man, here's someone who could have success, should have success, I'm rooting for Doug Peterson and his career to have success as a retread because he's already won the Super Bowl. Lovie Smith, okay. Not really excited about that with Houston.
I'm out on that. I'm not only not excited about it, I'm anti that.
I mean, the situation in Vegas, okay. Failed in Denver before. I mean, not really excited about that. You look around the other first-time head coaches, it's a lot of the same. You know, it's typically someone who has studied or trained under one of these young, hotshot offensive coaches. So, yeah, I mean, I know Mike McDaniel fits that bill also, working for Shanahan in San Francisco. But his personality and his background is so different, I can't help but root for him to do well.
I'm on the like retread quarterback. Like, again, if you go through the list, Eberflus has, a young quarterback who I think is overrated, but it's still early, right? Daboll, the Giants are another team that we haven't really mentioned, but they're going that path of trying to surround a guy who hasn't lived up to expectations, but that we don't really rank with a lot of these other guys because we don't think Daniel Jones is as good as they are. But they're approaching things the right way, and he's a good coach who's had success with guys, beyond Allen. Dennis Allen, I'm just a total non-buyer on the Saints. That's one of my big off-season themes. Lovie Smith, I think, is fired in a year at Houston. Even if Davis Mills is good, they don't have much talent. Kevin O'Connell, I couldn't be less interested in the Vikings, though I do think there's a chance for them to this is the biggest swing to me in the coaching personality type. And Zimmer had been there so long, and I think everybody grew so sick and tired of the sour coach that here comes in a fresh, young guy who is total opposite of the dour old guy, that maybe it regenerates the organization to a degree, but it's still the same quarterback who is good but not good enough that it's just a tired act to me.
Well, the other interesting side note to all of this with the young first-time head coaches is they're all going to call their own offensive plays. Nathaniel Hackett will do that in Denver. Mike McDaniel will do that for the first time ever throughout his coaching career this year in Miami. And Kevin O'Connell is also calling plays in Minnesota. Brian Daboll might. He may end up calling plays, but Mike Kafka has also been mentioned with the Giants as a potential play caller. And this was as late May, early June. They had not announced or decided. My guess is they've decided, but they haven't announced who's going to be calling plays there. So from a head coaching perspective, that's fascinating to me because, for instance, they have in Miami, they have a second-year guy who's the defensive coordinator for the Dolphins, but my guess is Flores had a huge say on the game day, not just the game plan, but the play call, had some input there on the defense. And now, while you still have the same defense and structure for Miami, it is solely on one specific coach. Meanwhile, you've got McDaniel who's handling everything from the offensive side of things.
I tell you,
that's tough to pull off as a first-time head coach and a first-time play caller.
Who's the most exciting team situation for a new coach? Is it the Raiders or the Broncos? Or am I leaving someone out?
It's the Broncos.
I think it's the Raiders.
Because of Russell Wilson?
Not just Russell Wilson. I mean, so Russell Wilson is the missing link to – I mean, they were a very solid team a year ago. Top 10 defense, strong pass rush, very underrated secondary. And now they've put Russell Wilson on an offense where the only piece that they miss is Noah Fant in that trade to Seattle. Their trio of wide receivers remains intact. Yeah. Jerry Jeudy's case was thrown out of court. So again, like they're just, and they've revamped their backfield. They brought those guys back. There's a veteran leadership quality there where it sounds like there's going to be a real training camp fight for the job. I think they have a good culture built up, and now they've implemented Wilson into that. The Raiders aren't a bad one. I think
there's a good argument there. I think there's a good argument for the Raiders because the Raiders were a playoff team with absolute chaos last year. They lost their coach. They had a guy, in a vehicular manslaughter, brutal situation. They had another guy off the team with the guns. They had distractions out the wazoo. I'm not a McDaniels guy, but I'm going to give some benefit of the doubt here that he learned his lesson out of the disaster in Denver and out of the false start in Indianapolis. And here he's inheriting a team with some talent, Waller and Renfro, and a good quarterback and some defensive pieces.
Plus Adams.
And I'm forgetting about the big addition. So I like the idea of the Raiders, and I like him. I do not like the 3 defensive hires. And I say that knowing you can do better hiring on the defensive side of the ball because the pickings are much better, because the vast majority of this list is on offense. And Tennessee here in town hit an absolute home run going and getting Mike Vrabel. But it's hard to get excited about a defensive guy in the offensive time of football. So I look at the offensive coordinators. Getsy in Chicago, I don't know that much about. Pep Hamilton, we do know about in Houston, and that's okay. Pete Carmichael is the guy I'm really interested in New Orleans. I remember writing this back when I was at ESPN, and it held true. There is no, and this is one of the reasons I'm not as big a Sean Payton guy as a lot of people. There's no Sean Payton tree. Nobody ever came out of there and went on to big things. And Pete Carmichael had been there forever and was never a play caller. So we're going to find out what Sean Payton left behind in terms of his chief offensive guy and how he can do as a play caller. He certainly doesn't have the talent because he doesn't have Drew Brees, and Michael Thomas might be a shell of himself, et cetera. But they drafted some people, Kamara, when he's not
in
suspended.
Legal problems.
Yeah, when he's not suspended is certainly a big-time weapon. I'm very curious to see what Carmichael does, who should virtually be the head coach offense when he's got Dennis Allen as the defensive head coach.
What a big sales pitch it's going to be for Sean Payton if the Saints fall off a cliff this year after piecemealing it together and almost making the playoffs a year ago with a bad quarterback situation and not a great roster last season.
I think on the one side you're saying, yeah, look how bad they are without me. On the other side, though,
what did he leave
hit on this. The guy split as soon as it got bad, and the cap got really bad, and
he quit on them.
He bailed on a team that was, loyal. The guy got suspended for a year for which gate was it? Bounty Gate.
Bounty Gate.
Yeah.
And keep this in mind too. Matt Eberflus, defensive coordinator of the Colts, is not going to call defensive plays in Chicago. It's going to be a guy, Alan Williams, who came with Eberflus from Indy. He was the secondary coach for the Colts, and now he's the defensive coordinator in Chicago. So, again, not just first-time head coaches. Some of them have decided to do what they were hired to do, and what got them the interview in the first place is their connection to one side of the football and their expertise in that area. Meanwhile, Eberflus gets the interview, gets hired, decides he's not going to call defensive plays. He's going to worry about the team and allow his coordinators to do it.
Look, the other reason,
and then with Williams.
The other reason it's easy to be down on Eberflus is that's the worst roster on that list.
Yes, you're right. Other than maybe Houston. But you're saying the first-time head coaches.
They're right there. I mean, they're right there with Houston.
Those
two teams are going to be in the top 5 of the draft.
An amazing story Kendrick Perkins told of a fight between Ray Allen and Rajon Rondo in the locker room and how the Celtics handled things behind the scenes. We retell the story through Kendrick Perkins next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on. Kendrick Perkins was on the podcast with J.J. Redick and others, I believe. Old Man and the Three is the name of the podcast. And
it's a good play on
told the circumstances of the championship season of 2008 in Boston and how there was a rift between Rajon Rondo and Ray Allen throughout the duo's time there in Boston. And, you know, there were infamous rifts between the two, and they played together from 2007 to 2012. Well, this is from Perkins. When things started to go south, in my opinion, the first incident was when Ray was pushing so hard to trade Rondo for Chris Paul. It got back to Rondo, and right there we started having a little friction. We made Ray and Rondo actually box it out. They had so much beef, we got to the practice facility, we brought boxing gloves, and they actually had to box it out because we didn't want the tension anymore. That from Kendrick Perkins.
Anything about how it came out and what happened from there?
No, I read a couple articles, but I've not heard the podcast, but I don't know that if he was pressed on it or just would not answer. But I was immediately thinking, okay, what were the results of the boxing match between Rondo and Ray Allen?
What if somebody ends up concussed
odds,
there?
I'm not messing with Rajon Rondo.
Yeah, me neither.
And Ray Allen is an elite all-time basketball player, athlete, but, man, I'm not messing with Rajon Rondo and that reach, and he is a tough dude. But so here's my...
Well, for the longest time, Ray Allen wouldn't go to team functions after the championship.
Yeah,
and he recently
and they also, after the 2011 season... Either that or after the 2012 season, he bolted for Miami, and his teammates hated him because the Celtics played them in a 7-game series in that 2012 series against the Heat, and they felt like you're selling out. Now, we're going to come back and beat them this year with you, and instead you joined the enemy, and that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. So this is great in theory. Hey, you guys have a problem. You're not going to address it. We're going to force you to address it with fisticuffs and box. I like the mentality behind that. I don't know that it solves anything if one guy gets his tail whipped in the ring.
Also,
like,
it
how do you feel if you're
anything.
the guy? Like, if I'm Ray Allen, I get whipped, in front of my entire team. If you go in there and you both trade some blows and you respect each other at the end, you got a bloody nose on each side, maybe a minor concussion or whatever, but you felt like, man, we're two tough guys who fought it out and we both got our shots in, then you move on and feel good. If one guy whips the other, I don't think that's solving anything for the guy that gets whipped.
I don't know about the minor concussion part. If somebody comes out of it with a broken nose and has to wear a face shield for the next 6 games, that's not good.
Well, again, I'm not talking about obviously they're not thinking about someone's going to get hurt and the GM's going to be mad at us. I'm saying from a player respect standpoint, it's not helping anyone if one guy gets whipped like the other guy's a bully and bigger and badder than the other dude in front of the entire team. That's not going to solve the rift between the two.
Well, they didn't want to.
If it's a draw,
doesn't sound
I think
like they wanted to do anything. I think the teammates made them. You know, it's like, so if nothing else, you get a couple of chances to swing and then it's over with. It's time to start practice.
It's prison justice.
Yeah. Minus being thrown back into the ring whenever you're down for the count, I would say, right?
Yes.
Coming up, more headlines of the day, and we get into DeAndre Hopkins, who continues to investigate his drug test. Final hour, OutKick 360, Monday edition. Glad you're with us. Across the OutKick network, 6th and Peabody, our location each and every day. Downtown Nashville with Yeehaw Beer and Old Smoky Moonshine. Plenty of headlines to hit over the final hour. We'll recap our conversation with former Texans head coach David Culley and much more. If you missed portions of that, you can go back anytime on the podcast. Just search out OutKick 360 wherever you download your audio. Subscribe to the YouTube channel as well, and you can watch the feed post-show or live, however you want to consume the show here each and every day, Monday through Friday. Headlines out there today, NFL-wise, and from the weekend. DeAndre Hopkins continues to say he's not sure how he popped for the failed drug test. He is going to or is currently appealing the 6-game suspension. But the quote in a recent interview with KPNX, he said that he's hopefully can get the suspension reduced by the time the season starts. And the quote here is interesting. He said, "We're still doing some research right now," Hopkins said. And I want to preface, he was popped for PEDs and was handed a 6-game suspension about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now.
Yep.
Hopefully before the season starts, maybe we can get the games down a little bit. But no, it wasn't on me. I'm a natural. I pretty much... he said a naturopathic kind of person.
Homeopathic?
No, naturopathic kind of person.
Using his words.
He says what it was, it's called Osterine. There was 0.1% of it found in my system, and if you know what that is, it's contamination and not something directly taken. I don't take any supplements. I've never taken supplements. I barely take vitamins. For something like that to happen to me, I was shocked. But my group, we're still trying to find out what's going on. So he admits that he's popped for this, and whatever second test would have been conducted to confirm that the first test was legit also came back as a positive. But the 0.1% is something, you will hear this a lot in martial arts, in the fight game. We were talking boxing a segment ago. Guys will pop for some type of performance-enhancing drug, and there will be a very small dose of it. And they will, and some of the organizations will point to contamination of a batch. And then you'll try to find another bottle that was produced from that batch based on the numbering system that they have, and go back and test that, and then you can prove one way or the other if there was contamination within the supplement that you take. However, the NFL
doesn't care.
They don't. They make it extremely clear that you're responsible for whatever you take, no matter if it's contaminated or not. So is it realistic he could have this reduced? Yes. Is it realistic that he's getting off of any type of suspension? No. And I think he's admitting that within that quote.
I'm surprised that we haven't seen, and I'm sure there are protections written in here, but I'm surprised we haven't seen a player go after one of these companies for a contaminated supplement. Here it sounds like it's absolutely what it is. DeAndre Hopkins has a sterling record. He knows exactly what he took, I presume. The measurements suggest that it's a contaminated supplement. He could probably find exactly what you're saying, another sample of that batch. I
guess, yeah. It's hard.
I mean, are they protected? And if they're protected against a contaminated supplement, then I would think that you wouldn't take the supplement because there's a danger of contamination.
Well, he's saying he doesn't take supplements. He's taking no supplements.
He says he takes the occasional vitamin.
Yeah, he said I barely take vitamins.
But keep in mind too, like a lot of these companies. You just name some average run-of-the-mill vitamin supplement company, whatever it might be. You can produce these things, these pills, capsules, whatever, and then you have a different packaging system, and the packaging company could have just packaged something that was completely different than what they are about to package,
and
it's
peanuts.
it's not clean properly.
I think everything that DeAndre Hopkins is saying is perfectly believable with how much stuff is out there and what could be put into food or anything else you're taking. And it's such a small trace of it. Here's the problem with that. Osterine, however you pronounce it, is the trademark name for a SARM. This is not approved for human use or consumption in the U.S. or any other country. This is something you get on black market channels, that specific substance that he popped positive for. If you remember the name in Nashville, you remember Taylor Lewan tested positive for Osterine when he had his suspension, right?
He claimed the same thing.
I hear that and I think, man, there's probably some form of like animal steroid in almost every meat that you could eat. Or I could easily see how something could contaminate something you eat and you test for a trace amount of something that is on the banned substance list. When I hear that it's something that's obtained through black market channels and not approved in the U.S. for human consumption, then I think, well, maybe it's harder to find that in just a cross-contamination. But again, I'm not calling him a liar. Like everything that he says, it to me is completely believable when you're talking about, was it 0.01% or whatever it is, the trace amounts of Osterine that was in his system.
Was it Dwayne Brown Hutton who was on a Mexican vacation and ate meat down there, and he did get a significant reduction or got a suspension washed away. Now he had like a long list of receipts, and the league went back and followed up on what he said, and he got.
Yeah, he won his appeal. He was a 10-game suspension, and he won his appeal. And
based on a Mexican vacation?
Based on eating too much meat during a trip to Mexico.
And exactly what you said, Chad. It was something that the cow or the bird that he ate had ingested.
Yeah, like all of that sounds, I mean, believable to me. Like that is not a far-fetched thing.
I mean, it's a very, very stringent policy, and we know why. But also, it's going to err on the side of guys being out instead of guys being in. We also know that there are guys taking stuff the chemistry's always ahead, and there are guys taking stuff that's ahead that they aren't yet testing for who are playing.
Well, the one that always comes to mind for me is Romanowski. What was the story? Because he was backing it. The deer antler spray or whatever it was.
Yeah.
That he was pointing to from players on, was it a Ravens player that had popped for something, and he was on Radio Row discussing something that they would take back in the day or something?
Yeah. That's one that also, I mean, this is the last 10 years, the deer antler spray deal was big for a lot of people in football.
Deer antler spray.
I mean, how do you like
deer velvet?
It's amazing to me just the whole process of finding out that deer antler can help your performance
in some way, shape,
like all the testing that has to go into. Let's take every piece of the animal and let's grind it up, and then let's see what's going to help us. Like all the times you test something like that and it does nothing, and then you find out, you know what's going to help us with our strength? Deer antler spray.
Yeah.
That's the ticket.
Well, and there's a degree of it helping. I'm no scientist on this. Obviously, none of us are, and we've all read about it. And there's a degree of it helping, and then there's a degree of you thinking that it's helping also. You know, it's a physical game, and it's a psychological game, this whole getting the edge through this stuff.
Well, the deer antler spray is supposed to help you with blood flow.
But
that's
these guys taking Viagra to stay warm.
It's a Chinese medicine used for thousands of years, according to Google.
I don't know about you guys. I mean, if I'm a guy trying to stay in the league, if I'm a guy trying to stay in the league through any edge, and I'm toying with something that I might get caught with, even if it's ahead of the chemistry, right? I don't know if I could live with the idea of waking up every day and getting my call for a test and then waiting for the potential suspension call. That would do more wear and tear to my mental state that would affect my game than anything could physically help me.
I think if it was something that you fully believed, this is the difference between me playing in the USFL or the NFL. If you thought that was the difference, or not playing sports at all,
take the chance.
You could easily take the chance and just fall back on, well, if I pop positive, I can claim that I ate Mexican meat on my cruise, right? I mean, you could always make up something as to what happened. I mean, if that was, again, if you can convince yourself this is the reason I'm hanging on to an NFL roster, I think you could wake up feeling fine.
I don't think Hopkins is guilty, but I'd love for the next guy who pops, who's a semi no name, just to say, I was trying to stay in the league, and then I did it. I don't know that we've heard a guy
I don't
plead
want
guilty.
to just assume guilt or innocence to anyone. Like, it would not – with these stories, it would not surprise me if DeAndre Hopkins was on the juice in some way. It also would not surprise me if he had a contaminated batch. Like, I get, like, the old baseball thing. You know, you see Brady Anderson pop that many home runs one year and then just disappear for a while.
His favorite year of baseball.
Well, I mean, you look at it and you think, okay, it probably was up to something that 1 year. Something was going on there. Or you see a guy gain, Latimer from the program gained 35 pounds of muscle in one offseason, and people are looking at him thinking, that guy's on roids. I get all of that, but I'm hard-pressed to just say someone's guilty or innocent by looking at them or seeing production. I think everyone's equally capable of taking a little juice if they need to get over the top.
When a relative no-name pops, I'm not uncomfortable presuming some guilt.
I don't know the frequency of these drug tests.
I'd like him to say I'm guilty.
But a decade ago, 15 years ago, guys knew after they got past a certain point, this was back whenever you could pop and get suspended for pot. You knew once you were tested, if you weren't on the list that was going to be frequently tested for a prior failed drug test, and you had no prior issues, after a certain point in training camp or after week 1, you weren't going to be tested again.
That's not PEDs, though. That's the two separate policies, and you're right about the recreational kind of stuff, but not performance enhancers. I think performance enhancers goes on year-round.
And random?
Yeah.
And that was – so if it is random and every player, in theory, gets tested the same amount every year based on the randomness aspect of it, to be tested and then pop for 0.1 and then to not have it again moving forward, that does speak to more innocence than guilt.
I agree.
But, it also the amount – I'm paying attention to the amount in the failed test. Right, and if you can prove that it's a minuscule amount versus what you would take if you were really trying to get help from said supplement, then I think it's easier to make your.
Is there an
argument.
allowable amount of this?
No, I think it's completely banned.
It's completely banned. That's why 0.01%, 1%, whatever it is.
0.0001% is positive?
It's not even approved to use, period.
For humans.
Yeah, not just by the NFL, but it's just not approved to use. But people use it. Clearly for an advantage in some shape or form.
I'm just saying, like, the fact that it's potentially in something that you eat, to me, would suggest there should be some minuscule number allowed in your blood.
I would need to do more research on just how likely it is it's in something you eat. That's just a scenario I'm throwing out where I can look at it and say, well, you don't know where everything you eat comes from. There could be something in there that you're not aware of to give you that small of a reading during a test. But, again, I'm no expert. And also, what is the control with these tests? I would like to know a bodybuilder that's on Osterin that tests positive in the middle of cycling through it. What is their percentage? Like, see what I'm saying? Like, someone actually on it, like, you got to know that information.
Right.
If you test someone or you have someone doing it and saying, okay, this person is doing it for whatever purposes. Like I said, a bodybuilder. What does that percentage look like compared to this?
Yeah, they don't really want us to know that kind of stuff.
Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. There's a player and a report that said player still has a trade request out with the team that he spent the offseason with. We'll mention this guy coming up. Also, there's a rookie who was taken very high in this past NFL draft, who will have surgery right before training camp is underway. We'll hit that, plus recap the David Culley interview. All that straight ahead on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on across the OutKick network. So Deebo Samuel, there's a report out saying that he has not rescinded the trade request, this through CBS Sports. And, you know, despite how desperate he may have been to get the new contract, guys, he didn't get traded during the draft. He shows up to all of the OTAs and minicamp stuff. He'll be at training camp based on the way he treated the offseason, and rightfully so. I mean, if he plays this continuing to show up card, it's hard for me not to see him getting some type of extension where he is, given the fact that they're investing in a young quarterback moving forward. Now, they still have Garoppolo under contract, and we'll see what happens there because he's about to start throwing the football officially it could be this week, early next week, but he's about to put that on film, and he'll be moved somewhere. But if I'm Deebo Samuel and I'm representing him, I'm thinking, given the fact that they've got Trey Lance and a rookie quarterback under contract at a much cheaper rate right now than what they're going to be paying Garoppolo, if he sticks around a year, or who knows, maybe they're able to work something out, but don't you think he's going to get the money to stay if he plays his cards right just by going into camp and playing the way he played last year? That's at this point, that's how I feel about it.
After the season, I think he'll get a nice deal. if he plays the way he played, for sure. And I don't think he has much. I don't think he has any leverage to do anything else.
Well, he certainly doesn't have the leverage that he had back in the draft.
No.
A.J. Brown won. Out of the 4 guys, A.J. Brown won, and the other 3 can't do anything.
It still bothers me that we consider losing to be playing through the contract and getting paid big at the end of the year. I don't – what world are we in right now? Like, you got players just decide what they want and they go get it, and it happens right away. It did for A.J. Brown. Good for him. He got exactly what he wanted. He got the payday he wanted. I don't think that he necessarily wanted to not be a Titan, but he was willing to take the steps to not be with the team he currently was with to go get the money. That's the play for Deebo Samuel right now, is continue to play the way that you have. You are a top young receiver in the game, and you will get yours, all of it.
And don't sulk.
In due time.
Don't sulk and don't I mean, look, if you just get it together, kind of admit that the play for something now didn't work, and you go be a good team guy and are productive, then if you want to be a long-term 49er, you've got a good chance to be a long-term 49er. If you go in and you're sulky and you're whatever, you're going to be somewhere else next year.
And Samuel's going into the final year of his contract. So keep that in mind, too. And right now, they don't have an extension laid out for Nick Bosa, who has the 5th-year option, but is not going to – I mean, they'll work something out with him. And I think what Samuel's trying to avoid is any type of franchise tag.
Well, he's going to get tagged. He may get tagged and traded, but he's going to get tagged. So they'll work something out with Bosa, unquestionably, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to have to by next offseason. But but if Bosa and Samuel repeat what they've done.
But Bosa has a 5th-year what's the word I'm looking for? Like Simmons. He's got the
5th-year option that they've picked up. But my point is, based on the money and the production, they're going to extend him next offseason if they, as long as Bosa wants to play a game. They may do it this. They're going to do it this early. Bosa's been doing the same thing Samuel's been doing, which is going about the day-to-day regiment. And Bosa's getting paid to do so. Based on where he was drafted, he's getting paid between $10 and $12 million this year in year 4, whereas Simmons is getting 2.2 in the same year, drafted,
difference from
15
2
spots?
to 19.
Yeah. So there's a big drop-off in pay scale there, also position and production as well, you could argue. But point being, Samuel, the big point of emphasis that they were making this offseason was how he was used. And on the open, he wants to be used more like a wide receiver, quote unquote, than a running back. The problem is, within that system, he is excellent in that role with Kittle and what they have on the outside, and then how they can move Deebo Samuel around. That fits him perfectly when you watch him play. Now, does that fit Trey Lance? It better. And that could also play a role in all this.
And I also think he's a guy that he's fine playing that role and being a team guy and getting the football in different ways. He just doesn't want him being a team player and doing those things to be used against him in a future contract negotiation when someone comes back and says, you're not even a franchise wide receiver. You're a receiver running back hybrid. You're not a pass-catching number 1 wide receiver option. He's trying to avoid that. It seems to me like if he gets the contract he wants, he doesn't care.
Well,
play me as a running back if you really see fit, as long as I have that huge contract.
Well, I think if the 49ers try to play it that way in terms of what they would offer him, somebody with him coming towards free agency or franchise tag, you can force stuff on the franchise tag, right? So you say, I'm not going to sign the franchise tag, trade me, and then somebody else will say, we'll pay you as a wide receiver.
Yeah, but the tag itself, they would have to pay him based on the position, not how they would like to use him.
Right.
So he'd still be tagged under the wide receiver category, which is going to be considerably more than the running back tag.
Unless the Niners are complete jerks about it and
they do the percentages and stuff.
And try to do the things where they say he lined up X number of times as a running back, therefore we should manipulate the number and it should be, because that's happened before for linebacker ends in particular. I can't think of other positions that have
tight
done
end comes
that
to
way.
mind. That's
I don't know that a tight end has pulled it off as a tight end wide receiver, but outside linebacker, defensive end, it has happened.
Speaking of Garoppolo, let me pull this up.
I'm anxious for that to
Edelman
come to its
podcast.
conclusion.
So Edelman
feels good.
Edelman wants to play again, right? So he's saying that now that I've taken a year off, my body feels pretty straight. But within this interview, Julian Edelman was asked about Martellus Bennett and his comments. So Edelman went on the I Am Athlete podcast and was asked about coming back, and he says he feels great. He'd love to play again, whatever. And Edelman was asked about what Martellus Bennett had said about Jimmy Garoppolo. And I'll tie in the 49ers here a bit. Bennett was on with the McCourty twins, the double coverage podcast that they do with Devin and Jason McCourty. And this was a lengthy interview. This is taken from, one of however many questions, and a lot of the questions had nothing to do with Garoppolo, but quarterback came up. And Edelman certainly knew about this and was asked about what Bennett said. Bennett called ex-Patriots quarterback Jimmy G a, quote, B. I can't say it. And
Can
that
we spell it out?
you can't win with a blank for a quarterback. Martellus Bennett saying that about Jimmy Garoppolo. Edelman concludes, quote, I can understand why Marty thinks like that. That's from Julian Edelman in reference to what Bennett said about Garoppolo.
Well, here's one thing I would say. A lot of time has passed since those guys saw him backing up Tom Brady, which is a hell of a different position than taking a team to a Super Bowl as a starter.
Also, if you're a B, you're a B. I mean, I don't know that changes. If they saw something in a backup that they would lead them to say that hasn't changed.
But you can win with them. They won the NFC with them.
They got to a Super Bowl. Yeah. Right. Yeah, the 49ers did. Yeah. I'm saying it from the Patriots days. They're commenting on him with that. So,
but the quote was, "You can't win with him."
In defense of Jimmy, well, they didn't win the Super Bowl. Patriots don't talk about conference championships. They're talking about winning a ring, right? I mean, they're on a different playing field than most of the rest of the league that would consider winning a conference a great accomplishment. That's not a championship for the Patriots. In defense of Jimmy Garoppolo, who next to Tom Brady isn't a B? I mean, that's a pretty difficult standard to live up to.
I don't know what behind-the-scenes stories they're pointing to.
There's a lot more going on here than we know about. So it's tough to speculate. But again, if your frame of reference is ultra alpha male Tom Brady, winner of more Super Bowls than any other quarterback alive, that's now done it at this age with Tampa, everyone's a quote-unquote B compared to Tom Brady. Yeah. So I don't know that I don't read that and think any less of Jimmy Garoppolo. I read that and think, well, these guys are pretty spoiled to play with Tom Brady.
And look, from what we know about Garoppolo, I mean, I hear that word, and I think to some degree it means he's not the toughest guy in the world. Well, he's missed a lot of games, but we generally...
He's available for like 60% of his opportunities.
We generally prescribe toughness and with toughness with that word, physical toughness, ability to play through stuff. Fair or not. I mean, sometimes you just hurt and you can't go. But, we also expect quarterbacks to avoid injuries, and the good ones generally do avoid injuries.
Yes.
Whether that's a reasonable standard, fair or not, right? Injury avoidance is part of the quarterback position. Mahomes is still a young guy. He's come into the league. He's avoided injuries, right? Brady, Aaron Rodgers, all those guys have had like one big injury and generally stay on the field. I think I had this conversation with Peyton Manning and did a story when I was at ESPN about injury avoidance being part of the job. Well, it's part of the job that Jimmy Garoppolo has not mastered. Fair or not, that's kind of part of the deal. And I think that's probably part of what they're saying. And also his personality. He seems a little like, if I asked you to name a preppy NFL quarterback, who's the first guy that comes to mind? He'd probably be top of the list for me.
Well, I just think pretty boy.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's
not his fault that he's a good-looking dude.
Right.
But I look at Jimmy Garoppolo and I think, this guy.
You could rub some dirt on him.
It looks like a guy, eating Subway sandwiches as a model, and not necessarily a pro quarterback.
Yeah, when it's actually Tom Brady who's advertising Subway sandwiches, though he's not eating them, which is kind of
Jimmy Garoppolo's advertising Subway sandwiches too.
Is he?
Yeah.
But not eating Subway sandwiches. Not eating Subway sandwiches to me, and I love Tom Brady and have all the respect in the world for him. That's more of a B move.
Yeah.
But there's the other, like, we can compare this to the quarterback he may be traded for in Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield played through the shoulder injury.
Oh, he's tough.
He's not a B. But that's not how someone would describe him.
He might be a J.
But yet he's regarded as a guy that the guys in the locker room didn't like.
We could say that word, jerk.
Oh,
he
man,
might be a jerk.
I love playing the alphabet game with this, with different descriptions
let's
of quarterbacks.
just talk in letters.
No, but like on the opposite end of the spectrum, there would be Baker Mayfield.
Agreed.
And he's also, according to those within that locker room, people were siding with Odell Beckham Jr. more than they were Baker Mayfield whenever it was decided that Odell would be out of there. Even after the fact, people were still upset with how things ended with Odell based on Baker's relationship with him. So it's just, if you're winning, everything's good, right?
Well,
if you're winning, everything's good.
We're getting into different descriptors now for different players. I don't think the knock on Baker Mayfield is weak or soft or a B. The knock may be difficult, diva, tough to get along with a bit of a jerk. And so guys might side with another teammate because they just don't like Baker as much. That's a very direct assault on manhood that Martellus Bennett is saying and Julian Edelman isn't necessarily disagreeing with in regards to Jimmy Garoppolo. So I think the two are different. Question for you guys, based off our interview with David Culley from earlier that I want to get into. Do you think he has any shot to be a head coach in the NFL again?
No.
Isn't that sad?
Well, I mean,
I don't think he was qualified to be a head coach in the first place.
He got his first interview
with
Houston.
I guess then what we're saying is it was a huge gift that he got an opportunity at all to be a head coach.
I think it was.
It was a great gift that he was given the opportunity by Houston. And I'm not going to say that they, gift wrapped this thing for him because it was anything but easy once he got there. I think they hired him. You guys tell me your opinion on it. I think they hired him because he's a relationship guy and had been known for repairing certain relationships and jobs prior, and they thought they could hire him and they could repair the relationship with Deshaun Watson. Because at the time, he had already requested the trade. They had just lost to the Tennessee Titans at the end of December. Bill O'Brien was out. He was demanding certain things. And they brought in David Culley and immediately tried to get them one-on-one to repair whatever relationship was worth repairing. And when that didn't happen, well, now all of a sudden there's philosophical differences, even though they're going to elevate a coach rather than hire from the outside.
That sounds good, and I would have thought that before today. But he said they didn't talk about Deshaun Watson during the interview process. And so
which
if
makes
them a bizarre organization. But if that's your plan, you would have said, hey, what we want is for you to come in and sit down with Deshaun Watson. We think you're the guy that has the best chance. Or do you think you're the guy that has the best chance? Or what would you do in a 30-minute sit down with Deshaun Watson? So I think they hired him because he's a relationship guy. And I think they also hired him because they felt like Caserio would be able to push him around. And Caserio wasn't, in the end, able to push him around because after one season, Caserio said, I want X, Y, and Z out. And he said no.
After hearing the interview today, I think this is a case of, at least from the Texans' perspective, and again, I've said it before, I think that he got a raw deal, just getting the 1 year, given the circumstances. This is what I've talked about a lot, when going opposite goes wrong. Because I can't imagine someone being more opposite personality spectrum, on that spectrum of personality, from Bill O'Brien than David Culley. And I think that they had enough of Bill O'Brien and his abrasive style and nature, and they talked to David Culley and said, here's a guy, like you said, Paul, we can probably push around, and it's going to be a complete departure from the personality of Bill O'Brien.
But Caserio was new. No, Caserio didn't deal with Bill O'Brien, did he?
No.
Rick Smith was out.
It was Rick
Bill
Smith.
O'Brien was his own GM.
Talking about ownership.
But
what they wanted.
What did in Bill O'Brien was the Hopkins trade.
Yeah, his GM term ended Bill O'Brien. He was a terrible GM.
They traded away DeAndre Hopkins for breadcrumbs.
Yeah, no, it was a terrible.
Well, he didn't get fired. Understand what I'm saying? He didn't get fired for his personality, but organizations always do this. Ownership, athletic directors, whoever, they just go in the opposite direction.
Yeah,
regardless of how to. Guys could have success and leave for another job, and you're going to go get the opposite style personality. James Franklin leaves Vanderbilt, and they go hire Derek Mason, who's a completely different personality from James Franklin. Someone who probably wasn't going to push for a lot like James Franklin was and be as outgoing about it. I think too often people doing the hiring fall into that trap.
I don't know, though,
opposite for opposite's sake.
I don't know if they're hiring for the sake of opposite as much as they were hiring for the sake of getting Josh McDaniels a year later.
But then they didn't pursue, which was weird.
Well, McDaniels didn't pursue. He was very specific on who he talked with and who he didn't. And so, if you just look at the timeline of things, if Watson's legal issues don't come to light a year ago, well, he's either traded, right, or he somehow is convinced to stay, and they then pair him with Josh McDaniels and again, we're tying this all in with the ties that he has to the New England regime that's now in Houston. You could also say the same thing about if Brian Flores' lawsuit doesn't happen, Sean Payton's in Miami, and if Watson settles, he's traded to Miami. There's a lot of things that didn't happen because of the Flores and Watson lawsuits. Either the one that was brought on by Flores or the ones that were brought against Deshaun Watson.
And I agree with you, Chad, about hiring opposite. Lovie Smith isn't that opposite of David Culley, though. That's the strangest hire. The sitting around waiting forever and then hiring Lovie Smith is the biggest indicator of how broken Houston is.
Yeah.
It also just doesn't make any sense.
No.
It would all make sense if they hired McDaniels or Gerard Mayo.
Yes, a Caserio guy.
I mean, hiring Gerard Mayo, if you're trying to avoid the stigma around the Brian Flores lawsuit, you can go hire a minority. You can hire a guy Caserio knows from the Patriots.
Well, they interviewed
accomplish
Flores.
all those things.
They interviewed Flores.
Exactly. So why Lovie Smith? That's where that hire doesn't make any of it make any sense.
They hired Lovie Smith because they didn't want to be viewed as racist whenever they hired Josh McCown, because that's who they wanted to hire. That was the storyline of the offseason.
Right. So follow through with that then.
Even if you don't follow through with that.
Oh, it wouldn't be looked at as bold.
No, I'm saying be your own man. I wouldn't look at it as bold, but if they think it's bold, then go do that.
Well, even if you're afraid
they were begging for another team to interview him.
Yeah, but if you're afraid of the racist overtones of whatever, because you just fired a minority after 1 year, the Brian Flores thing is going on. If you, in fact, and going with what you said, Hutton, which I don't necessarily disagree with, but if you hire David Culley because David Culley's a great fall guy to get rid of 1 year from now to bring in familiar Patriot Josh McDaniels, why not just hire familiar Patriot Brian Flores and or Gerard Mayo and not Lovie Smith?
No, can you imagine if Brian Flores was currently coaching?
It would be
shocking.
Shocking.
The league.
Josh McCown would have been shocking.
I don't know
Lovie
what
Smith
happened
was shocking.
with Gerard Mayo. Gerard Mayo could have said, I want this, this, and this based on control. Caserio's also the guy who's in the coach's headset during the games. And Lovie Smith was asked about that, and he said, that has never happened where I've been, and it's not going to happen here. And then the same day, literally hours later, I believe Caserio said, I'm going to continue to chime in when I want to based on how the game's going. There's a leadership aspect that Paul's pointing to in our conversation right now from the top down of that organization that is just bizarre. And I don't know if you're a young coach or an old coach or how well tenured you are if you want to get in the mix there. Of course, Culley, his first head coaching interview, he ends up getting it. He certainly doesn't regret that, but there's no way we would have thought that they just elevate Lovie Smith to the position in what was a last-minute decision if you look at the timeline of all this.
That's what makes none of it make any sense.
Whatever plan they had did not
I could
go
easily
the way
point,
they thought it was going to go.
Or they didn't have a plan.
1 + 2 = 3. If the conclusion was someone we were expecting or someone that makes sense with Caserio. When the conclusion is Lovie Smith and Pep Hamilton from David Culley's staff, none of it makes any sense.
None.
Especially given what David Culley just told us about philosophical differences in that I wouldn't fire guys they wanted me to fire. So they answered by firing him for that and then hiring his assistants to lead the ship.
Yeah, and if it's not offense or defensive coordinator that you're asked to fire, then what difference does it make, really, in the grand scheme of things, who you're bringing back as the head coach with your staff? I mean, in terms of on-field influence on game day, most of the time, the coaches that are asked to get rid of a certain play caller either do it or they're out with them. It's not like, and we don't know which coach they were referring to.
And two of the coaches,
but it's highly unlikely it's a wide receiver or linebackers coach.
Well, and two of the position coaches from that staff are now on Mike Vrabel's staff. Bobby King, inside linebackers coach. Tim Kelly, who's now passing game coordinator here, I think was he offensive coordinator in title or was he quarterbacks coach?
He was just he was a
offensive assistant.
Offensive assistant, yeah, because they had Pep Hamilton running. He was the quarterback guy last year. And he was running the offense.
Kelly was offensive coordinator previously.
Yes, and now it's Pep Hamilton doing that solely in sole focus. Kayvon Thibodeau is the rookie we were referring to last segment who has an injury. He's going to have hip surgery, and that's not good for a rookie that you're trying to get a lot of production out of in the rookie season. 5th overall choice. I shouldn't say surgery. I read this wrong. Hip injury that is going to keep him out of camp.
Oh, all of camp?
Not all of camp, but some portion of camp. And we're a month away from that, and they're already looking at this as being an issue with trainers.
Not good.
And they're declining to say what it was, but when they're calling it a tweak.
Well, a tweak is a small word, and it camp being 4 weeks away. A tweak is bigger than that.
But tweak
is smaller than that.
As long as the guy doesn't miss what I would call like the joint practice work of training camp, then everything's okay. No harm, no foul if a tweak or a minor injury is going to keep you out of a week of camp. Early week of camp. Especially at his position where it's just line him up and go, right? But like he's got to hit the ground running based on expectations for Kayvon Thibodeau and the Giants in general, trying to revamp that pass rush because they have Azeez Ojulari, and they're pairing him opposite of Thibodeau this year. 19 sacks in 30 games in college, 3 seasons. And if he can come in and start producing from the start, it's highly unlikely we see a rookie do that, but he's got the type of talent. At one point, he was the number 1 overall projection. And now they're hopeful that they have him for the start of the regular season based on the hip issue that hopefully doesn't linger too long. Hit us up on Twitter at OutKick360. Coming up, more headlines. We recap today's show, look ahead to tomorrow, and get you ready for the night of sports. And we need to talk Braves and Yankees and the weekend that was across Major League Baseball. That's next on OutKick 360. OutKick 360 rolls on. So they have attempted to subpoena Daniel Snyder, the House committee. Of course, that was last week. This week was the expected timeline if things were going to go how they wanted it to. Of course, it's not. Where they have tried to, the committee asked Snyder's attorney if she could accept service of the subpoena. Turns out, I don't know if this is over the weekend, but as of today, she's out of the country. So she cannot accept the service of the subpoena either. So they're both out of the country, which means...
And guess who else is out of the country?
They're not going to be able to do this.
The other chief lawyer at that firm just left the country, and the third lawyer at that firm is on his way out of the country.
How long can you just use the defense of I'm out of the country? Could he just stay overseas for the foreseeable future and just continue to respond with, I can't appear before Congress?
Well, Armando Salguero told us he thinks that Daniel Snyder is simply going to try to run out the clock here, in which case he could stay out of the country. Just
live on his yacht.
Tour Europe on his yacht.
Stay out of the country until the election, the midterms.
Yeah.
Just stay on his yacht until off the coast of France.
He's got his lawyers writing stuff up right now that says you're in international waters, so they can't prosecute currently.
Paul, right
so
now
you're fine.
No subpoena delivery.
What
available.
might he be walking by in France?
Oh, the Champs-Elysees. Probably Montmartre.
Painting something, no doubt.
Could be over at the Pompidou Center.
I mean, think how awesome it must be to be able to receive orders, legal advice that says, just stay on your yacht. You'll be fine. And we'll avoid all of this. Must be nice.
Check out Portugal.
Well, there's plenty of other news, but the one that was dominating headlines last week may not be that way this week, given the fact that they can't actually service the subpoena as they would like to properly. Chad, your Braves fell 2 out of 3 games to the Dodgers, but all of the matchups this weekend featured drama, but nothing like the Yankees and Astros.
Yeah, it was a really great weekend in Atlanta and in the Bronx this weekend with 2 big-time series for as big-time as, a mid-season Major League Baseball series can be.
There was attention paid to them.
Well, Freddie, and he played well, but his return to Atlanta with all the emotion going on with that on Friday, with him being presented his ring, 3 great games that ended in dramatic fashion last night with the Dodgers rallying 2 outs, down 2 runs, no one on in the 9th, and they go on to force extra innings and win the game in 11. And, Paul, your Yankees had a great series with the Astros, which I really think both could be a precursor to playoff series this October.
The Yankees went 52 at-bats without a hit. They got no hit on Saturday by a combination of 3 pitchers. They went 6 innings without a hit yesterday before rallying for Aaron Judge's second walk-off in the series, I think.
Yeah, but the walk-off earlier in the series, they hit. It was like 3-0, then 3-3, and then they didn't get another hit until the 8th or 9th inning of that game.
Yeah, 3-run homer, and then it's just unbelievable. It's one of those teams like you can never turn it off. Chad sent an all-rise message before I was just about to text you guys with he just did it again. Oddly, he rounded first and acted like he was done, and then the first base coach is somebody who's like, run it out. I think you got to run out a home run to get a home run.
Yeah, you have to touch home.
Yeah. So he was almost willing to concede 3 bases and a home run. And as a guy who bet on him to win the home run title, I need him running
Go touch
out.
that bat.
Yeah, saying, hey, this can help your next contract, Aaron. Make sure
Back
you touch
at
home.
it tomorrow across the OutKick Network.
Don't block the box, but kindly lock your locks.